For quite some time, I felt like I didn't want to talk about politics anymore. Especially with people like Donald Trump running the world, it feels like politics now more than ever is very divisive because we're living in a time where you're either for something or against something. And when you're for something, you're an enemy. And when you're against something, you're an enemy. Like there is no in between, there's no black and white anymore. Everything has a shade to it, everything has a color to it, and it's quite frustrating. So, for quite some time, I feel like I didn't want to talk about politics anymore. But then a friend of mine reminded me, or I did remember something. Uh, Someone once told me that politics controls everything. So, if you do not do politics, politics is going to do you. If you don't want to talk about politics, politics will do the talking for you. And this is very true. Politics controls everything. Your food, your medicine, your education, your work, your salary, everything. So I it took me quite some time to come back to the idea that you cannot just stop talking about something because it's frustrating. In fact, that is when you should talk about something because it's frustrating. Frustration can lead to uncomfortable conversations. Uncomfortable conversations can lead to solutions, a common ground, and all that. But 2026 is a very interesting year because it feels almost like when Trump first lost his re-election elections. I don't know if we'd call it re-election when he lost. I need to find a better word for that. But you get the point. So, a few years back, January 6th, fast forward 2026, in January, I think Trump has a thing for Januaries because he always leaves a mark every January, I think. But 2026 January, he wants Greenland. Now, he didn't just come up with wanting Greenland in 2026. He ignited more fire. He created more fire in 2026. But it's the same thing when he lost the elections. He didn't just wake up on January 6th that year and decided that his supporters should go and storm the Capitol, the U.S. Capitol. He had already, talked about it a few times, saying, hey, go to the streets if the results are not something that, you're proud of. So this year he wants Greenland. And according to him, for the United States national security reasons. I've been following, if anyone else has been following Trump through all this, I look at it and I'm thinking, you can't be serious. Like, of all the things you can do for your national security, Greenland shouldn't be on your table, And then he was talking about how if the U.S. doesn't take Greenland, Russia will take Greenland, and he doesn't want to be neighbors with Russia. But my man, look at the map. I don't think Trump understands how close to Russia he is. Alaska is neighbors with Greenland. So either he thinks Greenland lives in some box next to Hawaii, which is, well, knowing Donald Trump's mind, he probably thinks Greenland lives in some box on its own next to Hawaii. And and that is something, I wouldn't be surprised if that's how he thinks. But dude, you already live close to Russia. Alaska is right there, close as Russia. You can cross from Alaska to Russia, And but I'm glad that this is happening. Personally, I'm glad this is happening because NATO is probably finally realizing that Trump is a threat. Okay? And he says things and we brush it off as Trump being Trump. But I think NATO and Europe is realizing Trump is a threat. Now, here's a problem. Most of the countries that are part of the NATO alliance are very nice countries. For example, a few days ago, the Prime Minister of Norway got a message from Trump saying, since Norway controls the Nobel Peace Prize, and oh my God, don't even get me started with Trump's obsession with getting the Nobel Peace Prize. He did get a Nobel Peace Prize, but not his. He got it from the Venezuelan opposition leader, which is, my God, ridiculous. It doesn't even sound ridiculous enough, but it is. But back to the point. So he was telling the Prime Minister of Norway, Jonas, saying, hey, since you guys control the Nobel Peace Prize and you don't want to give me the Nobel Peace Prize, I am not going to be so considerate about, peace. And the Prime Minister of Norway is too nice. Absolutely too nice. And his response was, the US is still very strong allies of Norway, and we're going to do our best to make sure that, we keep the peace. Now, I get that. One person always has to be the bigger person in the room. And I don't think going harsh on Trump solves anything. So, like I said, a lot of nations in the NATO are very kind, very nice nations. There is no pushback, like real pushback, Trump threatens with tariffs. The responses are, we have to come to a better solution because this hurts both of us, which is true. Diplomacy and all, it's quite stunning to look at how world leaders are reacting to all this. Trump's reaction, he's like a toddler who has been denied something. Now he's like, fine, I'm going to just break everything else I have, So, and then the world leaders are like amazing parents who every time their child is breaking something, they're just getting them something new, something to replace it. Now, this is just an example. I'm not saying world leaders are giving Trump anything. They haven't. In fact, they're standing up against him, in my opinion, and this is something beautiful to watch. But we have to be careful. They have to be careful because Trump means everything he says. He doesn't just say things for TV or for comedy or for camera clicks or for viral moments. He can do things that he promises to do. He's renamed a few departments in the United States, and because he said it and people thought, oh, that's just outrageous, you can't say that, but he's renaming things. Now renaming something, an institution that's been there for decades, might seem small, but for people that have been there and experiencing that, it's a huge change. Like, he tried to remove MLK Day and instead have his birthday a public holiday. You're not that important, my man. You're not. But he says things and he actually does things. So world leaders have to be careful with Trump. You cannot just tiptoe around him. Some of these days he's just going to wake up and choose to, not talk and just do. And he can do that, But above all, I think if he's worried about, the national security and all that, he should really be careful what he's doing, because Greenland is a NATO ally. And attacking a NATO ally is something I'm pretty sure no one should be doing. Other than Trump, of course. And I mean, unless you're Trump, he probably will be doing that. But who knows? We'll have to wait and see. But like I said, he has an obsession with January. I think, he just does everything in January, which is, I don't know, just scary. He loves January and does crazy stuff in January, And recently he was boasting about how, his first year in office has been incredible and amazing. And I can't tell you what amazing was or what was incredible about his first year, because, dude, you're just frustrating the entire planet. He's one man frustrating the entire planet. He has half of Africa on a banned travel list, like banned visa list or something. I don't know. It's just too much. Half of Africa. almost. I think half of Africa. In some countries in the Arab countries. So he's just one man with a lot of power and not knowing what to do with it. You know, it's funny how we've had years where the focus is climate change and global warmings, and now the focus is Trump. It's literally Trump. Everything you look at, every story you see in the news, every story you read, every channel you switch to, there is a list with mention of Donald Trump, which is I don't I don't know. It's very scary, to be honest. But like like I say, we can't stop talking about politics just because we're frustrated. Frustration should lead to tough conversations. Maybe tough conversations would lead to some solutions. I don't know. If we're dealing with Trump, I don't know. In other things happening around the world, Uganda held another election, and the current president now sits for 40 years. Yeah, that's something. Man, it's there's a whole generation that has known just one president. Not just one generation, actually. Should be more than one or two or even three. For a country that half of its population is under 30, yeah, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of generations that have only known one president. I've only known one president, and I'm getting old. My mother's old, and she's known one president. A lot of people that I know who are old, they've only known one. So it's something. I guess they should just give the dude a Guinness World Record. Longest running president. I think he's the longest running president in history. 40 years. 40 years is insane. But I think the country Uganda should get a Guinness World Record for the number of people who ran for presidency this year or last year. I don't know. The campaigns happened last year, so does that mean they ran this year or last year? It's a very confusing stuff, by the way. But yeah, the Guinness World of Record should award Uganda a record breaker, or they should hold a record breaker. So many confusing words. English, what is your problem? I guess that's what you get for being multilingual. But there were approximately 200 plus people who were running for presidency in Uganda. Senior 6 students, senior 4 students, farmers, teachers, probably just anybody. I don't know. But the focus always goes back to two major people. It was the opposition leader, Robert Chagulanyi, who for some reason the entire world just refers to as Bobby Wine. I don't know why. Bobby Wine was his stage name, and his real names are Robert Chagulanyi. But when I was watching news coverage all over the world, they continuously refer to him as Bobby Wine, which is bizarre. It's like if Donald Trump had a nickname or a code name, and everybody just calls him by the code name. What would it be though? Tikka masala? I'm so sorry. Yeah, but you know what you get the point. So the focus was always going to be the current sitting president Museveni and the opposition leader, who was Bobby Wine or Robert Chagulanyi. See, I did it too. But he lost for the second time. He joins a list of many others who've lost when they come up against Museveni. Now, I am not praising Museveni, but you have to admit, 40 years in power, hate the strategy he's used to stay in power, but it is impressive. It is impressive.